What does process improvement mean to the profitability of your construction business? Well, it could have a tremendous positive impact, and the good news is processes are the one area where you have the most amount of control. So whether it's bidding work, planning work, building work, or getting paid, if you can develop processes that make sense, that has a tremendous positive impact. Today, my guest is Moustafa Moursy. He has a strong background in construction, and in fact, he worked for one of the country's largest electrical manufacturers, Schneider Electric. And in that work, he gained a comprehensive understanding of the construction space. He's even been on a job site pulling wire. Moustafa knows what he's talking about when it comes to construction. And his focus is very much on the sorts of processes you need to put in place to capture the leads that are coming into your company and make sure that you are maximizing your opportunities to grow your business. Today, we dive into everything process related and how you can identify the processes you need to improve, the sorts of tech stacks you need to bring to the table to help you with those, how you need to balance the demands of management with the realities on the ground of the people running the processes, and how you can keep focused on your customers so that every process that you put in place drives more business with the right clients and the right projects in the right locations. It's very much focused on helping you to improve your business. I know you're going to enjoy the interview. Moustafa is a great interview. He really is passionate about what he does. It comes across in our discussion. And so enjoy my discussion today with Moustafa. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Moustafa, welcome to Construction Genius.
Eric, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm delighted. One of the arts in life is understanding what you have control over and what you don't have control over in business. A lot of folks spend a lot of time worrying about stuff they have no control over and yet neglecting the stuff that they do have control over. In your mind, what is one of the key areas in business that someone has complete control over that they need to focus on?
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it. I love that because to me, it's process, right? We always talk about process and process improvement. And that's one of the things that I really love about process is that the ball is fully in your court. Things are happening and you're controlling how you act and how you take advantage of them. And it's fully in your court, which is much different than anything else in business.
So what is a process?
I like the kind of back up. And if we were sitting in a room and we were asking people, I'd kind of ask people like, hey, how do you think your processes are today? Right? Just kind of open. How do you think they are today? Good, bad? Or, put like a few choices on, or maybe you don't have any. And then usually what's going to happen, people will be a mix of people, but a lot of people are going to be like, I don't have any. And then that's when I'm going to be like, well, that was kind of a trick question because you can't not have any, right? A process is just by getting from point A to point B, right? It's the steps that you take to do that. So if you have a business and you have any number of customers, you have a process because the customer got through something to be able to become a customer, right? It's just the same like when somebody goes and they're like, hey, I'm not on a diet. And then somebody else is like, you just eat whatever. It's very important because people aren't paying attention to that sometimes. So then they're not even looking at optimizing it, right? And that's where a lot of that goes in. I could dive into that a little bit more.
So let's do that. I think it's important for us to recognize that we do have processes in place, whether we realize it or not. How do I know when a process isn't working?
Yes, there's process improvement isn't like destination. It's a journey, right? It's iterative. I mean, it doesn't stay static in time. And again, it's just, I love the diet thing because it works really well. It's just like your diet. You don't just be like, hey, I ate a salad today. I'm good. I'm done. Right? I mean, that's not how it works. There's things you need to be doing. There's things you need to not be doing. You always need to be checking what's working and what's not, whatever your goals are. Am I building up? Am I losing? Whatever. Is this working? Do I need to tweak the strategy? Do I need to improve it? How am I doing? So you always need to be doing that with your processes. Now, I would say though, if you've never looked at your processes at all, and if you're one of those people, which is fine, by the way, this happens a lot, nothing bad, who just never thought about it, or you're like, I'm not on a diet kind of guy, right? Then chances are your processes could definitely use a lot of work, which is actually a good thing because that means that however good you're doing now or however you're doing now, there's actually a lot of room for you to kind of get improvement in a way that's relatively easier than some of the other stuff that you could be doing like marketing or whatever, which the ball is not fully in your court to what I was saying earlier, right? You could pay for a trade show and maybe pay a lot of money. Maybe it's a great trade show, but for whatever reason, people don't show up that day or the weather is bad or whatever. I mean, we've all done it. Like, yeah, I've done so many trade shows. I was working corporate and construction trade shows. And it was always like very hit or miss. Like we would actually joke about it. Sometimes you're going to just stand there and talk to the vendors.
I know you have a lot of experience in construction. And, when I think of construction from a 30,000 foot level, I've got to bid the work, I've got to plan the work, I've got to build the work, and then I've got to get paid, right? So those are 4 core areas. In your experience in construction and working with contractors, where does a construction company need to focus first in terms of evaluating and then developing their processes?
Perfect. Yeah. So if you're kind of starting from scratch and you're like, hey, I never really did this before, but okay, you got me. It's important. Where do I start? So I always say, look at the number one most important thing in your business. And let's kind of trace that and start from there. So that's obviously going to be your customers, right? But we got to look at kind of like the customers and start moving in more and more until we get there. So the first thing is you have people that come in and they want to interact with you, right? If I was presenting, I'd show like a process board and put like one process up on the board. So they want to interact with you, they want to work with you. So people that you're bidding, right? We're calling it like lead management, whatever, right? So that's people that you're going to be bidding or you're going to be trying to prospect and get them to bid. But they get to a point where they come to you and they're like, okay, fine, give me a bid. So that's like the first thing. I would always start with that. It's really important because what happens is a lot of times in a lot of businesses, whether construction or not, you're doing a lot of things. The last thing you want to happen is somebody wants to work with you, but it falls through the cracks because you guys got busy, whatever. We had like 30 bids we had to put out this week or this month or whatever because it was really busy. We did good, like remembering offhand, and we put out 25 of them or 27 of them, right? Which is pretty good, like 90%, right? But you missed 10%, which could have actually turned into deals. You want that to be like really ironed out. Whether you want to have reminders, whether you want to have like a set, like, okay, somebody sends in a bid, maybe we have like some sort of inbox and we create a ticket or a deal in our CRM and we're going to like have like daily or weekly or whatever we look through and like are all our bids moving along? Are we sending them all out? Are we following up on them? That's really key. And on that note, something even kind of before that actually happens more than you would think is if you ever have any entryway to your business, not physically, but like a phone number or an email or a form, anywhere on your website, anywhere on your business cards, anywhere, make sure that somebody reliably checks that. And this sounds obvious, but it's actually not. A lot of times people, maybe they have one form on the website, they check, but then they have another form that was made, a contact us form when they made the website, and it goes to like some WordPress junk box somewhere. And they're like, I don't know, we never look at it. Make sure you do that because that's just a big loss. It's like somebody walks into your store and there's nobody at the cash register and they're like, what do I do? Like, and then they just leave. That's really key. But yeah, so the starting point I would say is definitely the lead management process. That's the first process. Put that in your head on like a virtual process board is the lead management process. Like when we do get leads, how do we work with them? How do we bid them? And then making sure that we're following up on those.
Okay, so let's just go into a little more detail. Let's assume that I do want to take a look at the way I handle my incoming customers. How should I go about that process in terms of what questions do I need to ask as I'm putting together the process and what steps sometimes get missed or what obstacles should I be looking for?
Perfect. Yeah. It's definitely an iterative thing. So for example, if we're doing process optimization or consulting for somebody, one of the first things we ask them is like, listen, tell me where you are today. Wherever that is, there's no wrong answers, there's no bad answer, but tell me where you are today and what you're doing today and what your process is like today. Even if your process is we take the stuff, we write it on a napkin, and we give it to the customer, and that's their quote. That's fine, but we need to know where we are so we know where we got to be. That's what you should, if you're doing this yourself, you got to ask yourself that internally, ask your team, ask whoever, guys, what do we do today? Find out what that is, right? And I personally, we like to like really map things out a little bit. It really helps. We get an email and then whatever, we have somebody in the office who routes it. And then, whatever, you're going to kind of find things as you're doing that. And you're going to start seeing, we have to route all the quotes through like this one person. Well, guys, what happens if they're out? I don't know. I mean, like nothing really. Like, right. Oh, okay. Well, that's a problem. The first thing is like understand where you are today, because then you can really understand where you need to go.
Once I understand where I am, how detailed do I need to get into the process? And what is that balance between detail and allowing flexibility in terms of the response or the way that the process is put together?
Absolutely. I'm sure we're going to talk in more detail on this point, but this comes up a lot. A good process really needs to account for different things at the same time. So one is it needs to make sense from the context of the customer journey. You can want to do things a certain way as a business, but like if nobody buys that way, like you could be like, yeah, we just want to like for example, not bid. We just want to like go straight to like selling projects, right? But that doesn't make sense. Nobody actually buys that way, right? So like you can want to do that all you want. It doesn't matter how good your process is. It doesn't work.
What do you mean by a customer journey?
Any customer, right, whether it's in construction, whether you're buying a house, whether you're just buying a product, goes through a journey of steps before they reach the point where they make the purchase or the transaction. It's a very common word in like marketing, but they go through a series of steps before they make that purchase, right? In this case, right, if the customer is like a builder or whatever, right, or general contractor, and you're the sub, whatever the case may be, I mean, their journey is that they're going out and they're first getting the project or requesting a bid and then getting the project and then shopping out different bids and then, negotiating and then giving you a PO and then you get the PO. I mean, that's their journey, right? Like you guys know the steps. That's their journey. But any customer anywhere has a journey. If you're buying a house, you go, you talk to the bank, you get a pre-approval and then you go to the realtor and then you find the house and then you make an offer and then that's your journey. So it's very important to understand what things look like from the perspective of the customer and what they should look like from the perspective of the customer. Because a lot of times what happens, and I've seen this a lot even like in corporate actually, where it's like they want to do things a certain way and that's fine. And it's like, I have this crazy good process, but it's like, no, you don't, because nobody buys this way. Like the way that you want to do it is not what any customer expects or thinks or, understands the world to be like. You can't just like decide to do things in a way that is completely different. I'm not saying you shouldn't do anything different, but in a way that completely breaks all the rules of engagement. You can't do that. It's not going to work. And it ends up causing a lot of friction because then the salespeople will fight you. And the salespeople are going to be like, that doesn't make sense. Like, how do you expect me to do this? How do you expect me to like put a number before I estimate? How do you expect me to like do something like tell them that their estimate is only valid for like a week when projects take a month to be awarded, for example, right? Like stuff like that, right? So yeah, that was the customer journey point. Hopefully I answered your question.
That was helpful. Once I've established the processes that I need to work on, who do I need to bring in to go through the process of deciding how I'm going to improve the process? In other words, who should be in the room in my company so that I'm making sure that I'm really outlining this in a way that's going to make sense and also is going to be helpful?
Yes. So let's go back to the things that I was saying make up a good process. So one of them is that you account for the customer journey on one end of it. Your process has to take that into consideration. On the other end, you want to account for the business needs because process also plays into like how you're tracking things. So you might be like, hey, as a business, we would really like to see our KPIs on like, how many jobs are we bidding and what's like our win ratio, right? And be able to tell customers like, hey, we bid you like 100 jobs and you give us nothing. Or like, hey, you give us a lot of work, right? So whatever, right? So account for the business needs as well. And then you want to account for the actual capabilities and functionalities of the tools that you're going to be using to execute that process, right? Whatever you're doing needs to work in a way with your CRM or whatever tools that you're going to use to actually execute that process. And then you want to account for the personnel who are actually going to be manning that process. And this is a big one that, again, people really sometimes forget. A lot of times we see this where, let's say a big company or whatever will bring in somebody and it's like, oh, so-and-so, and he has like, I don't know, Wall Street experience or something. And it's like, yeah, okay, he puts together this process and it's like, dude, but you have no idea how this works. Like this is, and then the salespeople will be like, dude, this guy hasn't sold anything and he doesn't know anything and this doesn't even make sense. And like, you guys are asking us to put like 1,000 clicks so we can get to the quote screen. And then like, how am I supposed to do anything? So you can't like do that, right? A good process manages between both, right? It's going to require obviously change on people, but it also has to account for the usability from the people who are actually using. Right now, each organization is going to bring in different people at different steps, a little bit different, but you always want to get feedback from the different stakeholders at some point so that you're accounting for that, right? If you're going to launch something, maybe take whatever, your top sales guy, your top estimator or whatever, and be like, hey, look, we're thinking of doing this. What do you think? Does this make sense, right? Again, they don't have to agree with everything, but it's like, okay, did you guys consider this? What about this? What about this? Then you kind of start incorporating some of their feedback into it and seeing. And one other thing you do even before that is interview people and be like, okay, if you could have a few things that were better, what would help you? Sometimes they might not have insight because maybe they can't think of, possibilities or tools that help, right? But sometimes they will. Sometimes they'll be like, hey, I forget about my quotes a lot. We bid so much, I just can't keep up. I can't keep up with having to follow up, for example. That's actually a comment. And maybe they're really good. But again, like if you have 30 bids and you're 90% good, which is amazing, that's still 10% that you're missing, which is 3 bids, which is actually a lot, right? I would interview kind of like the stakeholders and get some pain points. And then that helps us kind of decide like where we want to go and map that out and then get some feedback on it.
How do you handle pushback from your employees on processes? And I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a reporting process when you're building a project and the executives want a certain cadence of reporting But the field, the folks who are running the projects, from the project managers specifically, they're pushing back and they're saying, dude, why do you need all this information at this cadence? It's not really helpful. It's not really useful. I've got 3, 4, 5 different spreadsheets I'm working with. I need some help in terms of being more efficient with my reporting and getting you the numbers that you want.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something we run into a lot. Obviously, it's a very common thing. And I personally, it's interesting. So I have the experience of looking at it from both perspectives. So I was in sales, in B2B sales and construction sales specifically. Did that for a long time. I was the person who okay, why do we have to do this? Right. And then we also help organizations and help people kind of get that together. So I get it from both sides. Now, the thing is, there's a balance to doing this, right? For example, anytime we do, you always want to get buy-in as much as possible. Again, you're never going to get 100% buy-in because people still do have to change something they're doing. And it's still a little bit of work, right? But you want to get buy-in as much as possible. And that's why I was saying, asking people what their pain points are to try to incorporate, give everybody something to be excited about. Maybe they're not excited about one thing, but it's but hey, look, we made the follow-up for the bids. So now you won't forget your bids. Yeah, you have to report on stuff, but you get the follow-up, right? So it's there's kind of okay, fine, I get something in return for doing this. Maybe I'm not happy about everything, but I'm happy about something. And I have seen cases, there's really bad process where it's I'm not getting anything. Tracking isn't even useful. It's not even useful to me. It's not definitely not going to be useful to management. So why am I doing this, right? If people feel like it's pointless, they're not going to want to do it no matter what. And especially if they feel like it's pointless, even if I'm a rep and there's a manager and I feel like this isn't even going to help the manager, then I really don't want to do it because it just feels like I'm doing it as a check off the box type. Getting that buy-in as much as possible. Again, you're never going to get 100%. If you wait for that, you're just never going to do anything. So getting that buy-in as much as possible is key. Asking for the pain points, showing people along the way, making sure you didn't miss anything obvious. They may be oh, I don't want to put this in. You could try to find an easier way. Maybe there isn't. Maybe they just have to put it in. But they might bring up have you considered this? And it's a whole thing that you haven't even looked at. Have you considered, for example, that we might be bidding 4 different contractors? Well, how do you have reminders on 4 different builders or whatever, or general contractors? How do you have reminders on that? And then you remember, oh, that's actually good. We didn't think of that. Let's build that in now, right? So they might give you really good tips there. The other thing is always kind of show people it needs to be a balanced approach from management, right? When people feel that management is just trying to do things just to be big brother, they usually will push back more. When it feels like a team environment, guys, is it? And we've done this, kind of even coach some managers and CEOs. We were looking at a report for the support team. And we were and then one of the reps maybe had much longer time to address tickets. This was a different type of business to address tickets. And I'm listen, you can't approach this as this rep sucks. So you have to understand what's happening. Maybe that rep's actually really good and they're getting all the hard stuff that's getting punted to them. And then they just need to spend more time on it because they just have harder problems that they're working with. And they're yeah, that makes sense or whatever. So instead of in the conversation in a tone where why are your things so off? It's okay, help us understand what's going on, right? We have to work together. Having that environment creates less resistance, right? When people feel that everybody's just kind of fighting or it's big brothering, they just don't want to cooperate, right? It's normal. I've been there. I know how it works. Anybody's like that. But when they feel you know what, we're all working together, yeah, whatever, I'll log my stuff. Who cares? They're going to just come and we're going to have a conversation. I'll tell them what's going on. That's no problem. That's really key. And then kind of showing people, again, the benefits for them. So that's why anytime we do any of this work, at the end of the project, always, at least how we do it, you always want to have training with the team at large. You're having a lot of meetings with whoever is setting up, the managers, the CEO, whatever, but you have to end it with at least, probably multiple sessions, but at least one session with the team at large. Here's what we did, and here's why we did it, and here's how it works, and here are some of the benefits, by the way. And you know what? When you log this, and then you go out on vacation, the other sales rep who's backing you up doesn't have to bug you and call you 70 times and be where did you put that file for the bid? Because they already have it, because it's already in there. They could just, assign it to them when you leave and they could look at it and then great. It's easier for you too, right? And then people start getting excited about these little things, which really add up.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. One of the frustrations that a lot of contractors have is they bring in salespeople, business development people. They may have industry experience, they may not. And then the BD folks are totally pumped up and enthusiastic. And of course, they want to do good and generate some business. But then they bring in a bunch of leads that really are not the right projects with the right clients in the right locations. What processes can you put in place to help discipline salespeople to go after the kind of things that you're looking for, the kind of work that you want to build?
One of the key things that you're looking for when you're setting up your processes, and one of the key benefits is that the ability to be able to track what's going on so that you can make better decisions, which actually is kind of a loop, right? Because you track a little, you make better decisions, then you're like, okay, we're going to change our process a little bit more, and then we're going to track something else, and then we're going to keep making, it's like a wheel. In that case, right, you would want to actually set up in a way where it's like, okay, we need to be at least have some sort of reports on what bids we're putting out. It doesn't have to be too crazy, but we need to just know what bids we're putting out, how many are we winning, who are we putting them out with, and we need to have some sort of cadence where we're reviewing that together, right? Because it also shouldn't be that you come to them at the end of the year and you're like, dude, all these guys were not qualified. That rep is going to be like, well, where were you all year? Like, why didn't you tell me something earlier, right? Like, why'd you wait now? And all of a sudden you realize when you're doing like your books or something. That's not really fair to them either. So you want to have some sort of cadence. Like, hey, we're going to meet every month or every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks is probably good. And we're going to talk about, because the process is like part technology, part human, like, right? So you got to work both. So we're going to meet every 2 weeks. We're going to talk about like kind of the jobs that are being bid. And we're going to pull up this report, which is a kind of an ongoing report of what we're winning and what we're not winning and what industries maybe we're bidding. And then you can adjust quicker, right? Because the quicker you have insight, the quicker you can adjust. Hey, dude, you just put out like 10 bids last week for like high-rise jobs. We don't do that good in high-rise jobs. We're not competitive, right? We do more like commercial work or industrial work, whatever, right? Why did you do that? And then he might have a reason, or you talk about it, but like, I have a really good relationship with this guy. I still think we could get it. And then, okay, you might decide you still want to go for it. But at least now you can have the conversation earlier and pivot earlier, as opposed to like, John, what the hell? Like, you spent all last year bidding wrong jobs. And he's like, well, who told me not to? Like, yeah. So yeah, definitely a big part of that.
When you were in your sales role in your construction company, what was your biggest frustration with the project managers and the executive team?
Okay, those are two very different questions. Let's start with project management, because actually that's a huge point that we like to talk about in process. If you remember earlier, I said the process board, we went through like a couple of things. One of the points that we get to presenting a deck is like, we're like, okay, you got a customer, you're done, you pee, right? No, that's like when it really just begins. And that's a really big friction point for a lot of businesses. Transitioning from sales to execution is a huge friction point. Any business, it's a huge thing in construction, but it's big even outside of construction. Like software companies have this with onboarding, service companies have this with like just transitioning to like the service rep, whatever, right? That's a huge friction point. And a big part of it is process, right, driven. So there's not a good process for that like handoff. It's going to be a mess, especially in construction. The jobs are so complicated. There's so many parties, so many things said. There's so many moving parts. There's so many systems. We were selling like massive systems and there's so many different details, right? So if the rep, the PM aren't on the same page and the customer, then it's just going to be a disaster, right? So you need to have some sort of process that makes sense. At some point, my company, we instituted like order handoff meeting that was like required. It didn't solve everything, but it was certainly better than not having anything. I mean, some people had already done that like regardless, but it was like kind of mandatory before you convert an order that you do like some sort of order handoff meeting. So you could do something like that, like some sort of order handoff meeting. Yeah, I would document things a little bit better throughout the sales cycle so that the project management team has a little bit more insight into what was happening and they can be able to go back and refer to it and not have to go back to sales for every little thing. That's a key thing. If you're using a CRM, for example.
What kind of things would you document?
Concessions, deviations, timeline, like commitments, especially if they're not on the quote or they're non-standard, right? I would personally, there's different calibers of salespeople and different people do different things. I would have personally walked up to my project manager, met with them and told them, by the way, here are the things, right? But again, we want to make a process that, I think kind of to your point, just works for everybody or the lowest common denominator or whatever, right? So I would definitely put in any commitments, like, hey, we told the customer that if there's an issue with this thing, we're going to take care of it. Any timelines, like, hey, we told them that we're going to install temporary power within 2 weeks, for example, right? Because they really need that, but we have more time on everything else. Any price concessions or anything like, we told them we're going to include these extra products at no cost if they're needed. That stuff has to be documented. There should even be a process on how to even get that approved. But even, I'm not even talking about that. Even like, let's say it is approved, it still has to be known. Because what you don't want is like, we agreed to it, we got it approved by whoever, sales manager, whatever, approved it. But then the PM doesn't know about it. And then the PM like a week later, and then the client's like, well, where's my temporary power? And he's like, it takes us a month. And he's like, we said 2 weeks. And he just didn't know, like, right, whatever. And then you're just tight in a tight spot. So if you have like some sort of CRM or something, and you're putting in notes on this, and the project manager can come back and just look at the notes and just be like, oh, okay, this is the key things that they talk. You don't have to know every single thing. Like I called John and had coffee with it or whatever. You don't have to do that, but at least the core things should be documented.
Hey, this is Eric. Hope you're enjoying my discussion with Moustafa today. And I want to give you a quick reminder about my book, Construction Genius. Effective, hands-on, practical, simple, no BS. leadership, strategy, sales, and marketing advice for construction companies. So today's episode's all about processes, and your processes are run by your people. And so if you put the right people on the right processes and you lead them in the right way, you're going to make a lot of money in construction. And so to help lead those folks in the right way, you should read my book because it's packed with tons of practical information that will help you become a better leader. So go out to Amazon, purchase a copy for yourself and all of your leaders. And when you purchase 10 or more copies, shoot me an email at eric@constructiongenius.com. Tell me that you purchased 10 copies. I will contact you and we will schedule a 1-hour question and answers session around the book, plus a bonus leadership training session. All of that I bring to the table, and I would normally charge $3,000 for that, but you can get it for less than $200 if you purchase 10 or more copies of the book. Now let's get back to my conversation with Moustafa. In one of those handoff meetings, think about the best handoff meeting you were ever in when you were in construction. What were the key elements of that handoff meeting between sales and the project management?
I think part of it is on sales is, I don't know if everybody does this, but it's like kind of a common thing where sales likes to like, oh, well, the PMs are just whatever, right? They're just the PMs. Like some salespeople do that. But I think a lot of it also lies on the sales themselves, actually, the salespeople, right? If I didn't, because who is really controlling the scope of what's being sold? It's not the PM, it's the salesperson, right? If I didn't scope it properly, or I missed something, or I missed a couple of floors on the drawings or something,
Yeah, right.
Like, it doesn't matter how good the PM is, it's going to be a crapshoot for them too, right? Part of it actually starts way before that meeting, which is like how good of a job did the salesperson do scoping? It's actually one of the things I really learned from construction is like scoping is one of the most important things you can do. So like right now at the agency, for example, we do certain types of projects work. One of the things that kind of distinguishes us is that we'll scope it out very specifically. And the customers love that. And, even customers who are like, I've been burned before by like 3 other HubSpot partners or whatever. And then they'll see our scope. They'll be like, oh, this is good. Yeah, that looks good. Because they know exactly what they're getting. And it's like very clear and we're on the same page. And I learned that from construction because I used to scope out my jobs very, very specifically. Like, here's what we're doing, here's what we're not doing. And I'd have a discussion with the contractor as much as possible. We're selling to contractors. So I'd have a discussion with the contractor as much as possible. And yeah, we would kind of go through this. I think that's the first part of it. Like, right, sales has to get the ducks in a row as much as possible. Now, where there are deviations or where there are things that are maybe, let's just call them like not 100%, right? You're like kind of like, let's say you're interpreting the spec a certain way and, that could go either way. Or we know that happens, right? You should let the project manager know. Even if that's not something that was like specifically talked about with the customer, you should let the project manager know, like, hey, look, here is the issues that we might anticipate coming up. We might anticipate that, the inspector gives us a hard time for like, clearances because the room is tight. We might anticipate that we might have this issue. So then at least they can keep it in mind. And because now they're going to be driving and you're the passenger. Initially you were driving and they weren't there. They need to keep it in mind that they can kind of like at least like try to plan around it when they get there and try to manage expectations with the customer. That's a big part of it. And then I think the important thing for the project managers is to know that like you should own it now. Like you really need to own it. This is your baby now, right? Like, you took it on. Usually the good project managers were the ones that can kind of run with it and be like, all right, I have my questions. Tell me all this stuff. All right, I don't need you. I'll let you know if I need anything. I'll take care of it. And you kind of don't need to worry about it unless they bring you in, which they can and should, but unless they bring you in. The not so good project managers would kind of like, okay. And then like, unless you follow up with them like 70 times on the things that we've already discussed, they won't do it. And then you're kind of like, just, okay, am I project managing or are you project managing? Like what's going on? That's kind of like the give and take. Responsibility falls on both and on the company to have some sort of medium or process or something where it's like, here's an order handoff meeting. Maybe we have standard questions that like you got to go through and maybe you got to document it or talk about it or whatever. That kind of helps people not forget because also, again, there's just too many moving parts. And then training from both sides on like, as sales, here's what you need to do for clean jobs. As project managers, here's what you need to do to manage your jobs properly.
Earlier, you said there's a difference between the interaction of sales and project management and sales and the executive team. Tell me a little bit about how to optimize that interaction between sales and the executive team.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The executive team thing is interesting. And I think a lot of that, some of that falls in sales, some of that falls in the executive team, right? And I kind of alluded to it earlier where sometimes, like, listen, you have to take into perspective what your salespeople are doing and what actually happens, right? And if you don't know for whatever reason, then actually try to find out. Don't just kind of come in and you've never been in their shoes, for example, right? Maybe you have, right? There's a different story, but there's two types of executives. Some that have kind of been in that shoes, some that haven't. And it's fine. I'm not saying you have to have been in the shoes, but then find out what their shoes looks like, right? Because you can't kind of come and just make a judgment or make a decision. And this actually happens specifically in construction because people come from like a different industry and they've done whatever, they sold widgets wherever, and they come to construction and they're like, why is this happening? And why is this happening? And you guys are doing it all wrong. And it's like, no, we're not. You just don't understand construction. It's not like anything you've worked with construction. Now I've seen like we've worked with like multiple industries, maybe like 10 industries, including medical even. I think construction is actually the most complicated.
Yeah, definitely.
Tell people like me knowing construction is actually makes it really easy to do anything else because it's like really, you have so many parties, so many people within those parties, so many permits, codes, rules, regulations, all this stuff. It's really complicated. Because of that, this happens even more so in construction. Executive will come in from the outside and they'll be like, oh, you guys doing it wrong. I used to sell pens and like, oh, it was so much easier. And we sold, it's like, yeah, dude, but like, you don't get it, right? And people will also pick that up and they won't respect that person. They might still do it because, whatever, management, but they won't like really want to work with that person because like, all right, this guy's just here. He doesn't really know what we do. And he's trying to tell us stuff. Why should I listen? Like, right? I mean, it's like anything else. Like, when if you have a kid, if you just start yelling at them and they're like, you don't even understand like what I did. Like, they're just gonna like, they might do whatever you say, but they're not processing, right? That's a key part of it. Once you get that understanding, then you can kind of do things with that in mind, right? Now, I'm not saying that it's always going to be like on the executive to no either, right? But you have to get that understanding first before you can make decisions. Now, it might be that, yeah, you have 10 salespeople. Maybe you have one person who really just doesn't do anything. That happens. Not everybody's perfect, right? So maybe you have people that just, they're not good or whatever, right? But you need to have the baseline to determine what is even good before you can kind of make that conclusion. And vice versa, right? Like, this guy's really good. What is he doing? Like, right? Like, what does he do good? Like, if you don't know, but let's take what that guy does. Like, he already knows. Why don't we just take what he does and have other people kind of like try to mimic it instead of let me, who doesn't know anything about this process, bring in my way of doing it, which I've never even done it. Let's learn from people, right? Again, there could be suggestions back and forth, but I think that's the key thing. On the sales front, I would say that if you do have somebody who is trying to learn and is trying to understand what you do, and they're trying to be reasonable, don't just like stonewall. It's like, okay, like let me show you, right? Because that's going to help you in the end, right? Because if they get some level of understanding, then when they make decisions, they're going to factor that in. Like, if you just tell them nothing, well, then they're still going to make a decision, but they're just not going to factor in anything that you have to say, right? Because you didn't tell them that, right? I think that's kind of the part on the salespeople. It is on the executives also to make people feel that like, okay, we're trying to learn. We're going to incorporate some stuff that you say, maybe not everything, but we're going to incorporate some stuff. It's definitely a two-way street, but that's kind of the executive side of it.
Let's say I hire a new salesperson and I want to set them up for success in the first 90 days in my business. What are some key things I should focus on to make sure that I maximize their opportunity to get some deals and get moving in a good way?
That's a great question. And there's so much that goes into it. I feel like we could do a whole episode, but that's something that a lot of people like kind of don't do in all levels, right? You just hire a salesperson, you assume that they know things, and then you come like 6 months later, you're like, dude, you're like 70% off your quota. And he's like, what is my quota anyways? I don't even know. And it's like, yeah, it's bad. Like,
what's a quota?
yeah. And so it's just, there's a few things. You got to assess first the capabilities of the person that you hired and where they're starting from. Again, going back to what I said earlier about process, but it really applies to anything. You got to know where you are to kind of know how to get to where you want to go. You know where you want to go. You also need to know where you are. If you hired somebody who was, let's say, from a similar company, whatever, and they've already been doing it and they've been working with the same type of clients, it's going to be a much different roadmap than if you hired somebody who's out of college, for example, or like an intern or whatever, right? It's going to be a lot different. Why don't you ride with these 2-3 sales guys, spend the day with them. First month, you don't even have don't worry about selling anything, right? First month, first couple weeks, whatever it is. Don't worry about anything. I just want you to go find them whenever they're going on the road, ride with them, take turns, whatever, and see what they're doing. That's really important because you need to know, if you haven't done it, you need to know how to interact with the customer, and it's a very specific thing. And if you kind of just jump into it, especially like there's different personalities, but especially, certain personalities, you can get destroyed, like eaten up alive. So that's really, really key. And then you have like some sort of cadence where you're checking in, right? So let's say you do that. I would say separate from whatever your regular cadence is, especially if somebody new. Maybe you guys meet every 2 weeks as a team. But I would say like, look, you need a little bit more attention. We got to give you that attention. So every week, we're going to meet separate, one-on-one, and let's discuss. Let's just go through like what you did last week. Let's go through like what the jobs you're bidding. Let's see any help you need, and then have that. So that way, at least if you just stop there, I mean, there's a lot more you could do, but at least if you stop there and you just adhere to that, then you're having these checkpoints. You will know if something needs to be addressed. It's like, all right, they sit down and it's like, I actually don't understand how this product works or how I'm supposed to sell it. I don't get it. And it's like, all right, let's help you with that. Right now we get that there's a problem. You don't get it. Let's help you with that. If you have that cadence, that will help a lot. Because what often will happen is maybe they do that initial training. Maybe they don't even. And it's just like, all right, they kind of assume that the person gets it. But it's very complex. That's not really that reasonable. You can't expect like, okay, we gave him 2 weeks of training and now he knows everything. There needs to be some iteration where you're kind of like checking and seeing like, okay, are they processing it? And I've seen it. It can actually end up really bad. Sometimes that happens. And what ends up happening is somebody ends up in a company for 3 years or 4 years and they still don't know very basic things because there was never that checks and balances. And I can't fully blame them because it's like nobody's ever trained them or sat down with them or gave them the opportunity. For me, when I started, I was very fortunate. I was surrounded by like a lot of people that were very senior at the time. And it was like one of like the best teams like in the country almost. And like I went and learned like from every single one of them, and they would spend time and they'd spend like an hour like teaching about like a really basic thing. Like I remember one guy sat there, like if you're in electrical, one guy sat there and for like an hour explained to me what a lug was, right? And like it was like, if you're not in electrical, it's just like a piece of metal where the wire goes. But he sat there for an hour and explained the type of lugs, and he's like, let me pull up a sample I have on my desk and let me do this and let me do that and whatever. And I was like, cool, that's really good because the foundations were like really strong. And if you set somebody up for strong foundations, they're going to crush it later on. For me, I felt like one thing that really helped me, I had really good foundation. I was in a program and like I asked a lot of questions, which I like to do anyways. And then that just helped me like throughout even life, like not even just that one job. So you got to set that environment for people.
When you were in sales, you were working for an electrical contractor. When you were in sales, what was the biggest project you ever sold?
I mean, I did projects in the million. I worked at the manufacturer level. I did projects in the millions.
Millions?
Yeah,
Okay.
in the million.
Yeah. Can you remember one where you were on the verge of losing it, but you were able to turn it around and win the project?
Oh, there's a lot. I mean, that happens all the time. That was like the funnest thing, for sure. And by the way, when I say millions for the manufacturer, means that like it could go up to like 20, 30 million contracts for the contractor, right? Because we're only the one part of it. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot, and I definitely remember like specific ones. And I would say there was a lot of different, this is more like sales, not really process, but it's fun. There's a lot of different things that go into it. One of the things though, that really went into it, and I was just telling somebody the other day, is to be good in this field. One thing that's like really useful is being good at both, not just the sales aspect, but also the technical aspect to some degree. And people sometimes overlook that or they lean on one and the other, but you really got to be good at both. I was always interested in both. Like I studied engineering, but I didn't want to sit at a desk. That's how I ended up as a sales engineer, like, short version of the story. And because I like talking to people and like doing all this stuff and doing business. But like that really helps because then you can like have some ingenuity, like, right? Hey, the job needs to be like a lot less. And then you're like, all right, well, maybe we have this option, maybe we get creative here. And maybe you have like the discussion with that contractor or whatever, the builder in your case or whatever, right? Of like different options that you can do. So that came in a lot, right? Like that ingenuity came in a lot. I mean, there was times where we cut jobs like substantially. There was even times where, hell, like it wasn't our job. Like I would redesign jobs. I would completely redesign them, like once to the extent where like we got the AutoCADs from the engineer and redid the auto. I remember I was watching the World Cup and I was sitting there like on a Sunday and I was like redoing some of their calculations. It didn't even have to do with this, but it was like what it took to get the project. And we had, we had like a sales manager who was pretty good. It's like whatever it takes, just do it to get the project, right? And that was like simple but good advice.
It's interesting though, because you made the really good point there that I think one of the reasons why contractors sometimes struggle with their business development people is because they don't have the necessary technical background. And they don't take the time to train them. And so you just have these nice people running around, but they're not really that productive.
Yeah, there is the stereotype. And I'm not saying anything about that of like, hey, the guy that just comes and drops off donuts, right?
Right. No, that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Not that that's bad, but like you also want to try to be a little bit more than that guy.
Some substance.
Yeah. You don't have to be like a full blown, like, hey, I can install this job myself either though. Like, don't get me wrong. I'll tell you, like one thing I did, for example, I worked at a manufacturer and we sold the stuff, right? But I actually was like, I really want to know how it's installed. So I actually called contractors and shadowed them. And I went and pulled wire myself, right? And that helped a lot. Like be a contractor, like, no, I didn't do it enough, right? But I know like what they go through. Like, and I'm like, okay, pull this. And I did that with a lot of different parties, right? So now I know like what it's like on the field. So if I'm talking to a contractor, I'm like, this is actually easier because of this. And I actually did it, like, right? So I actually know. That helped a lot. I didn't do it all that much, but even the few times I did, it helped like massive amount. Because you got to realize, people always think experience in terms of years. First of all, the number of years of experience you have doesn't matter because based on what I told you earlier, the quality matters a lot more. You could be sitting there and you're not even asking basic questions. You have no foundation and you're there for 10 years and you're like, I don't even know what this product is. That actually happens, right? So it's like the quality. But also, when you're coming from zero, you can gain that first bit of experience really, really fast. So if you're new and let's say you've never just seen a side of the business or you don't know how it works on the field, then go, especially if you work at a contract, it's even easier. Just be like, I want to tell the manager, tell whoever, be like, look, can I just get like a few days, a week, whatever. I don't want to sell anything. I'm going to go on the job site and just treat me like a worker, treat me like a fieldsman and just tell me what to do, tell me to pull wire, tell me to install conduit, whatever, right? Like then that 1 week is going to give you like massive confidence because now you went from 0 to 1 week, which is like infinite percentage increase, right? That's really key. And I would say, again, the management, the executives have to facilitate that and understand that. Sometimes executives overlook that, especially if they haven't been in that themselves. It goes back to what I was saying about types of executive. If you haven't been in that yourself, you're from another industry, it might not be that important. If you sell widgets or something, or you sell whatever, like phones or something, it's like, okay, you don't really have to understand the inner workings of the phone, whatever. But it is actually important. It's very important in construction. You got to facilitate that and give them the chance. And it's nothing wrong with like, okay, we're going to wait a month or two before we put this guy on the road. People think, oh, it's going to delay my revenue, but it's really not because it's just not going to be doing anything useful if they don't know anything anyways. Like, it's really not.
If I'm going to be coming after this idea of process improvement, as we're wrapping up here, give me 3 steps that I need to take immediately to begin to move towards putting in place processes that work and that benefit the business.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing, and it's always going to be the first thing, is find out where you are today. Take a cold, hard look at where are we today. Again, don't feel bad. There's no bad answer. And in fact, if anything, it's going to give you an idea of how much room there is for improvement, which is always great. If I told you that you could come today and with your same exact resources, you can get 10% more sales with the same exact resources because you just improve your process. Everybody's going to think that's good news, right? That starts by finding out where are you today? What are we doing? What are we getting? Where's our issues? The second thing is you're going to want to get the right tools in place to help you kind of with this process. Once you kind of decide what the process is, you're going to want tools. You're going to want to have like a CRM. Maybe you want to have like a bidding tool. You're going to have different tools like a tech stack, right? So assess where your tech stack is today, right? What tools do you have right now? What are you using? What are you not using? Where are the gaps? But again, it always starts with the business first because sometimes people get excited about tools, but then like you can have the best tools in the world, but like the house isn't going to build itself. This is not how it works, right? So you need to know what you're doing with the tool. If you're in construction, you know this. So you need to know what you're doing with the tool. You need to have skilled labor doing the stuff with the tool. You need to have a plan to use the tool. It's not about the tools first. And a lot of people will get excited and jump into the tool, but then it doesn't really. So first understand where you are, where you want to go, where you need to go, and then kind of the tools. And I'd start there. And as far as processes, if you're only going to optimize like one thing or 2 things, let's say 2 things. I'd say the first one is when people are coming in, inputs into your business, right? People are requesting bids, people are requesting whatever, make 100% sure that's like airtight, there's reminders, there's whatever, that like we got to get back to them. That's like really key because these people who potentially want to work with you, and if you're just like kind of like not there, then that's like the worst way to lose a job. So make sure of that, airtight, whatever. And then the other thing is like, you also want to make sure like following that through, that you have a good follow-up on a lot of the stuff that you quote and that you're able to like look at that and see. Because it brings up more macroscopic conversations where it's like, you go to somebody and you're like, and sometimes you've had to have these conversations, but only when you look at it, because you don't realize day to day, you're like, wait a minute, we quoted this guy 30 jobs. We got like 1. There's no way in business if that's all they got. Like, there's no way, right? Like, so it's like, dude, what's going on? Like, you guys haven't given us anything. You give us like a tiny job, like $10,000 job, and we quoted you like $30 million worth of work. What's going on? Then you have that conversation. Like, do you guys even want to work with us? Because like, we're also not like a quoting house, right? Like, do you guys want to work with us? Maybe they're like, oh, your price is too high. Well, okay, what can we do about that? Well, we're competitive on these jobs, but not these jobs. So let's just quote you these jobs. So then you can have these conversations, right? But a lot of people don't do that. Again, sometimes you don't notice because like day to day, you're getting 10 quotes, whatever, in a week, you're quoting different people, getting some orders from some places are really good, some places aren't, but you're not really sitting and thinking of this one company really didn't give us anything. It's not necessarily immediately obvious. I would definitely look at that. And then I'm adding a thing, but the transition between sales and project management is really key because even though, well, actually, no, it's both. But I was going to say, even though project management necessarily can't win you, well, they can't win you the first order. They could definitely lose you the second order. And they can also win you the second order too. Yeah. So sometimes people are like, I had a really good experience with the project. I want to work with you guys. I don't even care if it's a little bit more, right? Like that all the time. Actually, they're less, if they come back because they had good service, they are less likely to be as price sensitive. I mean, it still can be ridiculous, but they're less likely to be as price sensitive because they're like, at least I'm getting peace of mind. And that's really important. People pay for peace of mind all the time. And it's worth it. It makes sense business-wise too. Like if I'm not going to have to spend all this time fixing mistakes, then like, fine, whatever. I'll pay an extra 5%. Who cares? It's totally worth it.
When you're looking at the processes, then you've got to first evaluate where are we today, assess the tech stack to see if you have the right tools in place, and then focus on making sure incoming leads are airtight, that you have good follow-up with the stuff that you've bid, and then that the changeover between sales and project management is really dialed in.
The first two are like essentially just macro, what you got to do. The next three are like, if you're only going to optimize a few things in your process, start with these. Like that's kind of like the hierarchy of the two. Yeah. But yeah. So assess where you are, assess your tools, and then you could optimize a lot of things. But if you're like, I only want to do a couple things, then do those three things I would just say.
Excellent. Tell us a little bit more about your business, Moustafa, and how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I run Push Analytics. We're a full service digital agency. We do a lot of different things beyond the process stuff. We do process consulting. We help people build out their CRMs. We're a top tier HubSpot partner, like platinum tier. We also work with other platforms as well. And we do marketing. We have like a growth ads team. We've worked with a lot of different types of businesses. So it's pretty cool because we see like what works and help people kind of reach that point where it works. I like to think of us as like business engineers. Like we're not like working on like solving a specific like feature or whatever. We're actually working on trying to engineer the business. And that's kind of like the MO we've taken. When we started with growth ads, I was like how we took it, and that's how we ended up in this space. Kind of we're the business engineers.
Excellent. We're going to have links in the show notes to websites so people can reach out to you. And Moustafa, I appreciate your insights. Thanks for joining today.
Yeah. I'll just add one thing if that's okay.
Please.
And especially, I really love talking about construction. It's like, that's like where I kind of like grew up, and like,
that's cool.
It was like really fun. Like I'm having a good time here. So if people want to reach out, and I'll take the call, just reach out to us at hello@pushanalytics.com. So just easy, hello@pushanalytics.com, and just put in the title like Construction Genius Consult. I will happily do, no cost, whatever. I'll, sit down and chat. We'll chat for like 20 minutes or whatever, and kind of go through if you want to just, pick somebody's brain or you need help or whatever. But I'm happy to just kind of like jump in and talk. But just make sure you put that in the title so the team knows to like specifically route it to me, and I can take the call with you.
Great. So again, if you want to reach out to Moustafa specifically, go to email hello@pushanalytics.com. Put Construction Genius in the subject line. It'll get forwarded to Moustafa, and he'll get in touch with you and have a deeper conversation with you about how you can improve your processes. Excellent. Appreciate your time, man. And thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, this is Eric. Thank you for listening to today's topic. I hope that you came away with some killer takeaways on how to improve your process. And thanks to Moustafa for spending some time with us here today. Just a quick reminder, you can reach out to Moustafa, hello@pushanalytics.com. Put Construction Genius into the subject line, and Moustafa will reach out to you and give you a free consultation on how to improve your processes. I think that would be some good use of your time because he has some tremendous insights that would benefit your business. And again, thank you for listening to Construction Genius today. Please give us a rating and a review. So hit the 5 stars if you think we've earned it. Write a few lines about why you like Construction Genius podcast, and do that where you get your podcasts, whether it's Apple, whether it's Google, whether it's on Spotify, or even on YouTube. You can leave a comment under the video. Thanks again for watching and listening, and we will get you on the next episode.